Reid, what are some of the services that Amazon has deployed on the AWS platform for telecom infrastructure?
We have a complete 5G network running today, completely built on Amazon services. We have launched a network with Dish Networks in the States, for example. In Bermuda, we're currently working with a company called Paradise Wireless that you're familiar with. They're running on AWS services as well. They're taking advantage of two of our services. They sound technical, but basically the first one is called Elastic Kubernetes Service, which basically makes it easy to run what we call containers on our AWS infrastructure. And then there's another service called EKS Anywhere, which basically allows you to run Kubernetes services on hardware that you have in your own data center.
When you think about cloud native telecom infrastructure and architectures,
right.
This is a really new idea.
Yeah.
Telecoms have been running for decades with proprietary hardware and software
Correct.
Solutions. And so how do you get the tier one carriers out of this mindset of, and you've got some experience at tier ones, how do you get them out of the mindset of the traditional infrastructure model and moving to cloud?
Okay, that's a great question. So first of all, we staffed a whole industry business unit at Amazon, specifically with people that worked in telco. What we've done is we built a strategy where we're, first of all, providing the best infrastructure we can. So we're making sure that our infrastructure works good with telco workloads. And then we're working with what we call ISV partners, or independent software vendors that provide software to the telco industry, and we're doing deep engineering integration with these companies, making sure that their software runs perfectly on the cloud. And so we're kind of working at a couple angles. We're building the infrastructure ourselves. We're building the infrastructure of partners that sell to telco, and then we're going in and educating the telcos about why they should build in the cloud.
Well, there's not very many new or greenfield deployments versus existing or brownfield deployments. So brownfield, where there's already a very well-established, long-standing infrastructure, transitioning is a big challenge. So how do you pave a roadmap for a tier one carrier to get them through that transition?
I think you need to prove the cloud works for them. One of the behaviors we're seeing from telcos right now is they're very interested in cloud. They just don't know where to start. So we're seeing questions about, what if I wanted to use cloud to back up my network? What if I wanted to use cloud if I had a disaster and my complete network collapsed? They see the benefits and they're thinking, okay, where can I actually use cloud selectively first?
Right, introduce select elements.
Yeah, but certainly having the only network today running 5G network with Dish, it really helps because they couldn't believe it was happening, and we got a tremendous number of them calling us and say, I need to understand the architecture because this is something my engineers are telling me isn't possible. But we proved it is possible.
The Dish deployment is really a first of its kind and is trailblazing in many ways.
Yes.
What are the risks and opportunities you see with that deployment?
We started that deployment and we had to do a lot of work to make sure that, first of all, the architecture was right. So we actually had to build what we call local zones, which are kind of like mini regions or data centers that are smaller to run some of the network workloads that are kind of latency dependent. So first of all, we had to make sure the architecture was right. Then we had to work with multiple ISVs to make sure that their software was actually running on the cloud. Then we had to stitch them all together. So we've learned so much from that deployment that we're utilizing when we talk to other CSPs around the world.
One of the big advantages that's available to carriers with cloud architecture is fast and cost-effective and immediate scale and scalability. And so how does the Amazon cloud achieve that?
Well, you take a look at where we have availability today. So for example, in the United States, we have multiple regions, but we also have what we call multiple local zones. And so this allows you to have cloud computing closer to the end user. So a lot of the telcos will say, well, I'm worried about latency, I'm worried about this, and we'll say, well, we have a local zone within 100 miles of where you're trying to build. So because we've worked with Dish and we've worked with our architecture team, we can provide that architecture to telcos around the world that's scalable, available, and more cost efficient than building their own data centers or housing their own architecture and their own servers and that type of stuff. So in the infrastructure layer, we can really prove the TCO that works for the telco.
So there are some real benefits that carriers can realize in terms of CapEx savings associated with these scalable cloud native architectures. But there are big players that dominate the telecom infrastructure landscape today, being companies like Nokia or Ericsson or Huawei. How does Amazon AWS compete and beat the big players in the market today?
I wouldn't say we beat them, we enable them. So what our strategy is we help them build their software to run in the cloud. And we have a strategy work with multiple different, we call them independent software vendors, to make sure their software works. And so we're giving choice in the marketplace. So we have partners that are large, like some of the companies you mentioned, or some are small. What we're finding is some of the players that have embraced cloud native architecture and the benefits of building their software in the cloud, they're starting to win deals. And that's starting to pique the interest of some of the larger operators around the world saying, okay, we keep hearing all these announcements about a new network running on the cloud. Let's dig deeper and find out how we can leverage it within our architecture.
Network security.
Oh, yes.
Is a huge topic, and we could go in a lot of directions, but I'm specifically really interested in hearing how you address the concerns that the tier ones would have surrounding network security.
It's obviously a question. What I would say is you take a look at the customers that Amazon supports today, whether they're military, whether they're government, whether they're financial institutions, we're held to an extremely high standard. So through those deployments, we have 98 certifications, for security around the world. So security is one of our #1 priorities.